Welcome into the Big Little Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. NFL and the college football weekend is upon us, but we're going to talk a little bit about Russell Wilson getting his job taken and Jaxson Dart taken over. But first, before we get into that, we're going to mention Russell Wilson in the Hall of Fame case, or maybe lack thereof, that he potentially has. Andrew, I'll give you this first question to kick it off. Is Russell Wilson a Hall of Famer?
In my opinion, Russell Wilson is not a Hall of Famer, unfortunately. Growing up, you look at Russell Wilson, he was one of the most consistent quarterbacks, and he was also one of the quarterbacks that was always just in the mix for playoff races, especially with that defense. But I think that, especially in his earlier career, he was very reliant on that defense, and it was the reason that they won that Super Bowl and got back to a second one. After that, they were consistently in the playoff race, due in large part to his play. But I don't know. He's one of those quarterbacks that was consistently in the top 5 to top 10 quarterback conversation, but was never an elite standout quarterback. You never thought Russell Wilson was the best quarterback in the league, and he's not won any significant awards like that are just completely on him, like an MVP or anything like that, and hasn't had any significant all pro standout seasons where you'd really consider putting him in there because of any of those statistical achievements. Obviously, he's won a Super Bowl, like I mentioned earlier, and he has been one of the best quarterbacks in the league for an extended period of time. But I think the Hall of Fame is reserved for those guys that were the elite of the elite, and unfortunately, Russell Wilson just misses that cutoff, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think that he's got to be in the Hall of Very Good, and he's a player that hopefully what he was able to do for the Seahawks doesn't get lost in all of this. I've seen a lot of former players kind of put their opinion out there on him. I know Richard Sherman said that look at his record without the Legion of Boom, but I just feel like he was very much the cornerstone of that franchise post Legion of Boom era, if you will, like when it was kind of fading a little bit. And then I know Tony Gonzalez said that if there was any player that play themselves out of the Hall of Fame, it would be him. I don't think that is a fair thing to ever say. I think once you're in it, nothing can change that potentially. Like even if you had a couple seasons of 20 plus interceptions or something like that, and you just really destroyed in a sense your legacy, I still think you'd be a Hall of Fame quarterback. So I don't really buy those, but I just think career stats wise, peak wise, it's not really there. You got a lot of other guys with MVPs maybe to their name or 2 Super Bowls to their name that are waiting their turn right now, and I don't think he's going to get in above them.
Yeah, I will say, to Russell Wilson's credit, he was one of the most healthy quarterbacks that we've ever seen. I think the stat is that he went his first 9 or 10 seasons without missing a game. He consistently played all 16 games during the regular season, and it was just, in that respect, one of the best quarterbacks. And in general, he had one of the prettiest deep balls that you've ever seen. He was always very accurate as a quarterback. But when it comes down to it, those top level quarterbacks that are probably going to be in it, for this generation, it's probably Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson. And then from then on, you start looking a little bit deeper. But for that generation, he kind of made it into the end of that Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees era. And I think that he was always on the back end of that echelon, and never towards, you never thought of, or it depended on the season, but even when he was playing at his best, he was never above those guys. And I think that is the cutoff, especially even when it comes to Eli Manning, and he was on the back end of his career when Russell Wilson really started taking off. But I'm not going to say Russell Wilson was never better than Eli Manning, but holistically as a career, if Eli Manning didn't have 2 Super Bowls, and Russell Wilson didn't have a Super Bowl, if they both had no Super Bowls, I think I'm taking Eli Manning's career and or just Eli Manning as a quarterback. That's just my personal opinion. And if neither of them had Super Bowls, I think there's questions for either of them getting in. So that was a just off the top of my head comparison, but I know the comparison was made a lot when Eli Manning retired Russell Wilson's getting close, about him making the Hall of Fame and where would he be if he didn't have any Super Bowls. I think that Eli Manning is just the better overall quarterback, and that I think that Russell Wilson just falls into that category, is the point I'm trying to make, of quarterbacks that are just on the cusp of it, but are in more of the Hall of Very Good conversation, like you mentioned earlier.
Well, I'm glad that you at least brought up Eli Manning. I was going to go that route. I'll talk about Eli Manning first, and there are some other guys that are waiting, or at least coming down the pipe, that definitely have gotten some Hall of Fame buzz or will also get in eventually. But it's just a conversation that I don't think should have ifs in it, if that makes sense. I kind of sympathize a little bit with Russell Wilson's case, where it's that one pass, if they score on that, on that drive against the Patriots, yes, he's got 2 Super Bowls. That's an if that I can see, just one pass prevent you from making the Hall of Fame. Like, is that the case? That I'm willing to acknowledge potentially. But if we compare him to Eli Manning, I have a tough time getting on with that because those Super Bowl runs were 8 games of amazing, absolute Hall of Fame play that ended against the New England Patriots, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick dynasties, one being the 18-0 Pats at the time, and then the other being in 2012. So it's like those performances spanned more than just a few games or just one pass. It was 8 games, and then also at the same time, I felt like he was very consistent. Statistically, Eli Manning's not going to his career numbers will be very high up there. And I feel like he reaches that bar, but statistically season to season, he definitely had some ugly ones, but also at the same time, stats kind of, they look a lot different now, especially when you compare some of the QBs playing today, as opposed to the later 2000s.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that front. And the point I was trying to make about the Eli Manning thing was just that, like statistically and just like from the eye test, I feel like I always would have rathered Eli Manning at the quarterback position over Russell Wilson. And I don't know if that is a hot take, but just I feel like Russell Wilson, like especially towards the beginning of his career, didn't really like. He was more of a game manager than anything else, and then that is like towards the middle of his career is when he really started to develop, and then like the just accomplishments kind of bear that out, where he only has 1 first-team All-Pro, 1 second-team All-Pro, has made the Pro Bowl a couple of times, but like everybody makes the Pro Bowl. So I just don't think when you look at his career holistically, and then you even remember it from like start to finish, if he's especially from the very start to like the very end, like the 2 latter ends of his, or the former and the latter end of his career, if it's going to be wowing anybody away. And I think that's the point that a lot of people are trying to make when they're talking about playing himself out of like being in the Hall of Fame, because I think that people are saying that if he retired before he went to the Denver Broncos, there's probably a more strong conversation to be had, because he still does have that Super Bowl and he leaves his career more on a high note, because that last year in Seattle wasn't great, but like wasn't anywhere close to the drop off that was in Denver. But I still don't think that either way he's a Hall of Fame quarterback in my opinion. So I think that the case like is a little bit interesting to be made, that like his career has just gone down by the wayside since he left Seattle, but I don't see it really either way.
I don't think he's going to retire at the end of this year. I mean, maybe he will, but there is a bit of a logjam that's being built up with the quarterbacks, and I think that that's something that should be recognized. You still got Rodgers, Breeze, and Brady coming down the pipe potentially over the next handful of years. Rodgers obviously still playing, but I think this will be his last year. And then you got some fringe guys like Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, Stafford whenever he retires. I know that I don't know if those are 3 for 3, maybe 2 out of 3, maybe 1 out of 3, depending on who you ask. Those guys, in my opinion, would probably be ahead of Russell Wilson. I mean, I think with Stafford's performance with the Rams really kind of helped him a lot. And then statistically, Stafford's got 60,000 passing yards. And just comparing guys from the same era, Russell Wilson is at 46,000. He's almost at 47,000. So it's like that difference is taken into account. Maybe you throw a guy like Matt Ryan or Cam Newton in there. I think they're a little bit further down. Both guys MVPs, no Super Bowls, but some might even argue them over Russell Wilson too, because I just think a lot of people, when they think about the Super Bowl ring, it does go to the Legion of Boom that year that they beat the Broncos. So there's a lot of QBs that are potentially also ahead of him, and I don't see it.
I really like the Matt Stafford comparison because of the fact that I think they played for the majority in the same era of football. And then also, I think that before he left the Lions and went to the Rams, there was genuinely a conversation, like, or there still is a conversation, but like the conversation was very like passionate on both ends of should Matthew Stafford get into the Hall of Fame just based off career numbers and him having so many passing yards and him having so many or having decent seasons, with at least statistical seasons with the Detroit Lions, who were like the laughing stock of the NFL at that point. But I think that towards the back of half of his career, he maybe hasn't improved his quarterback play, but he's done enough to get the Rams a Super Bowl, and in general has it like improved his like career stats towards the end of the career, to the end of his career, while Russell Wilson, it feels like, is doing the exact opposite towards the end of his. So I think that case is like definitely like comparable, and I think that Matthew Stafford is like definitely like maybe before he went to the Rams and before Russell Wilson went to the Broncos, that was probably flipped. But now I think Matthew Stafford definitely has the edge over Russell Wilson in terms of getting into the Hall of Fame.
Okay, one quick point before we get into Jaxson Dart starting. I know we've taken a little bit too much on this topic, but I always thought that when I was a big fan of Russell Wilson going to the Steelers. I know it sounds crazy with how that Broncos era kind of ended, but I thought that he could potentially have had that Kurt Warner type of resurgence where he was not a bona fide Hall of Famer when he got to the Cardinals. He had that bad stint with the Giants. They were, in the midst of kind of a transition period or whatever. And I just thought what he did with the Rams potentially, and I know a lot of people felt like this wasn't enough just holistically for a career. He had the peak, but wasn't enough for the career. And then he had a couple of really nice years to end with the Cardinals. They went to the Super Bowl, almost won it. So that I thought was potentially the route that Russell Wilson was going to take to the Hall of Fame, but that definitely seems to have closed now. Then he's getting replaced here this upcoming week. But that leads us into Jaxson Dart. Ole Miss USC product is going to be making his first start this upcoming week. What are we thinking about this move from the Giants' perspective, and how do we think that Jaxson Dart's going to start his career?
Yeah, so I think this is definitely an interesting move to throw him in against the Chargers here. I think that Brian Daboll is essentially risking his the rest of his coaching career, at least in New York, on the fact that Jaxson Dart will be good, and I'm hoping for his sake that he is. But he literally said that making the switch from Jaxson Dart to from Russell Wilson to Jaxson Dart was his decision. So that is completely on him, however this goes. And I think that this is definitely a tough spot to put him in. 0-3 is definitely on the path to getting him fired, to getting Brian Daboll fired, because he was already on the hot seat, at least the last season, if not the last two seasons. And it is really unfortunate that that it's this Chargers defense, because it is not only improved from last year, it looks like one of the best defenses in the NFL, and this is even without Khalil Mack, who's been sitting out the last couple of games. So it's really it's a really bad spot for him. There wasn't really a good spot to throw him in. There's a lot of hard games coming up, but I just need to see it out of Jaxson Dart, right? Because there's such a high ceiling with Jaxson Dart, but there's also a pretty low floor. And I feel like that's why he was taken in the back half of the draft at back half of the first round at 25th overall. He has his high moments where he can go for 400 yards and 3+ touchdowns in a game, and it could possibly light up, at least in college, and then possibly light up an NFL defense like that. But then there's also the Florida game where he throws 3 interceptions, one of them called back within the span of 2 minutes. And I don't think that those two Jaxson Darts are two separate people. There can be Jaxson Dart in the same game. He had a decent game against Florida, and then it completely went away from him. So I do think that there's a lot of things that need to get fixed with Jaxson Dart, and we'll see exactly how he plays. I'm not the highest on him, and I think there's a reason why he kind of fell in the draft, and there was not a huge buzz around NFL quarterbacks coming into the season. But I mean, Brian Daboll before this stint in New York was supposed to be a quarterback guru and an offensive genius. So we'll see how it plays out, and maybe we see a lot out of Jaxson Dart. But this week is just a hard week in general, because the Chargers are on a heater and 3-0 at this point.
Yeah, so Jaxson Dart, I understand where you're coming from with the low floor, and that Florida game is definitely a real blemish on his college resume. But I'm just going to go the other way here and say they said this on the broadcast a ton, because they were looking at the Giants' schedule, and they were saying, hey, if you throw them out against the Saints, that's probably the best time to do it. But then right after that, you got the Eagles, Broncos, Eagles, Niners, and that's a tough stretch too. So at the very least, you might as well set him up to at least have his second start against the Saints. He's going to, probably have a rough one against the Chargers, but he gets that second bounce back game to try to vault him into the next few games. But also, too, you drafted a guy in the first round, and I'm not a huge fan of rushing anybody, but he started every year that he played, essentially, or for a good portion of time, especially, his time at Ole Miss, but he started when he was at USC as well. He's had plenty of games in college, and I think that that's something that kind of goes a little bit overlooked. So he might be more ready than we think. And I think the Giants have some good weapons. And if you are 0-3, do you really want to send Russell Wilson back out there when he's essentially showed you 2 really bad games and then 1 good game against the Cowboys defense, which looks really weak? In the same move of Jaxson Dart being the guy that you throw out there and your job relies on him playing well. I mean, would you want that, or would you want Russell Wilson at 0-4 or 0-5 or whatever it would have been? for that to be what your job is reliant on. I mean, he potentially could give them the best chance to actually win football games. And I think it's a good move. It was a necessary move. I saw this coming in the offseason that Russell Wilson was just going to be a bridge quarterback. I was out on him by that point. And I like the move. I say throw him out there. You got enough. You think you have enough. You think you could be competitive. He started plenty of games. Why not? It doesn't matter who it's going to be against. He's going to play good teams and bad teams in the NFL. As long as his confidence doesn't get shattered, that's all that you have to make sure that you monitor. I think it's a fine move.
Yeah, and I think especially in this first start or the first couple of starts, he should just be ultra reliant on like Malik Neighbors and the talent he has around him. Like that defense can make things happen. I don't know if they're gonna completely withstand the Chargers offense that looks like Justin Herbert is playing like potentially an MVP candidate by the end of the season. So it'll be a tough task, but like that the defense that he has behind him isn't bad at all. They have some real playmakers on that side of the ball, and then on offense, Cam Scatterboo looked really good last game. So maybe there's a portion there where you're not just throwing him to the dogs, and like you have a Cam who can like maybe open up a play action game, and then Malik Neighbors can get free. And I just think the plan going into this game should just be able to feed the weapons you have around you as much as possible, and then have that defense try to hold on for your life at that point.
It's certainly easier said than done, but yes, this Giants team has a ton of weapons. I think they got two very good running backs, plenty of guys that he can pass the ball to as well. And maybe the defense shows up in a game that you're not expecting it, and you actually can maybe squeak out a win. Like any given Sunday, whenever it comes to the NFL, and maybe Jaxson Dart is the rookie quarterback that we see this year, because it's been a bit of a trend that actually plays much better or above expectations and is a serviceable starting QB for this entire rookie season, or for his entire rookie season. So I think that that's very possible. Let's move into the Heisman Trophy talk. It seems like almost every player outside of Jeremiah Smith from the preseason is out of the race, or at least that you would have thought. And this is just about as wide open as I can remember. And maybe this is the year that it's not a QB award. I don't know. We'll see. But who are you looking at in this Heisman race that you like the most? And who do you see potentially getting a New York invite?
Yeah, so I'm sticking by my guns here, right? I said Jeremiah Smith before the season started, right? Carnell Tate had that amazing game versus Texas, and he essentially won them that game. But Jeremiah Smith is still a dog. He's still one of those guys you look at and is the X factor on that team. I don't like Julian Sain has been decent against bad competition, and Carnell Tate did have that game, but Jeremiah Smith is undoubtedly the best player on that offense, and he's the best player on an offense that leads the number one team in the country at this very moment. So I think that if he plays consistently and he's just getting 100 yards every single game, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, has his Heisman moments where he's playing against Penn State, Michigan, and making one-handed catches, and really is the X factor in those games, I don't see why it wouldn't or it couldn't be him, or at least he wouldn't get an invite, because of the fact that, like you said, this race is so wide open this year. John Matier was the Heisman favorite going into last week, and then he breaks his or has surgery on his hand. Shout out Dr. Shin. And then from then, now we have just a bunch of guys in the mix. Connor Stockton is in there. There's Carson Beck's in that race. And then that's not even mentioning the 2 favorites. So at this point, so there's definitely a lot to be said about this Heisman race. And I think it's completely up for grabs. I think Carson Beck will definitely be in that mix, if not in New York, one of the guys who's just barely left off that list. I think Jeremiah Smith has a very good case to be right there too.
Yeah, I when I look at the top, I mentioned there's one player from the preseason that's still involved in all of this, and that is Jeremiah Smith. So I think you covered everything with him. I think part of his case does get helped a little bit by the quarterbacks kind of shuffling a little bit as he builds his resume. I think that that's a big part of a position player, or non-QB position, winning the Heisman or getting a New York invite, is the quarterbacks not really being at the very, very top tier, because it is a QB award at the end of the day. But Carson Beck is an interesting position because, for me at least, I think that he's a guy who can get a New York invite, but I don't know if I see upper echelon he'll win the Heisman just yet. But I think the way that Miami has played so far this year, they're getting the number 1 overall team buzz. I think that if he just takes care of the ball, will probably end up getting a New York invite. Dante Moore out of Oregon, Marcel Reed, Texas A&M, Gunnar Stockton, Georgia, Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana. They all look good. And Dante Moore's got a great opportunity this week against Penn State to really vault up these the odds to win the Heisman. But I don't know if any of those guys are definite yeses for me right now to win the Heisman. And then Mateer, like obviously he had that thumb surgery. You got to the Dr. Shen shout out before I did. I definitely think he would have been the guy as of right now. I believe he was top in the odds before that injury, but right now, yeah, it's wide open. Maybe it ends up going to a defensive player. Maybe Ruben Bain is a guy that we hear later on in the season from Miami off the D line as somebody who gets a New York invite. I think that that's very possible that we could see a player that is really dominant defensively on one of the top defenses in the country get some buzz as the season goes on. But we're going to need more quarterbacks to fall off a little bit. And including maybe even Carson Beck too at that point. I did a little bit of research before I toss it back to you on when was the last year that a quarterback wasn't invited to New York? Because obviously it seems like it's a QB award to win it, but like, has it ever been as like so wide open to the point where you have like a receiver or two running backs and a defensive guy or, what have you? And the New York kind of fluctuates from 3 to 5 invites. Since they have invited multiple people, based off the research I've done, and I believe they started inviting multiple people early 80s, I don't think it has ever happened where a quarterback wasn't among one of the players that were invited to New York. So there's going to be probably at least one. And for some of the years, there was just at least one. So I think that that's something to keep an eye on if it gets that bad or if any of these guys don't have great games. Because Garrett Nussmeier, who we haven't even mentioned either, was somebody who's getting a lot of Heisman buzz, especially even after week 1, didn't really play great. But he was a guy, he was a name, and just seems like he's not even mentioned.
Yeah, I think that the Garrett Nussmeier buzz has definitely died down, but I think that stat like makes a lot of sense just because of the fact that it is not only a quarterback award, but if you're going to invite 3 to 5 people and that award be for a specific position, you'd think that position would always get an invite. At the very least, the best quarterback on the best team is going to make the Heisman New York City kind of like watch along, for that lack of better words, Heisman finalists. But Fernando Mendoza being the Heisman favorite at this point is like a little bit funny to me. No offense to Indiana fans. I just think that this is maybe an overreaction by the markets to one really, really good game. And do I think that Fernando Mendoza is a good quarterback? Sure. But him winning the Heisman is just a little bit of a stretch for me. And I'll completely walk it back if he does end up winning the Heisman. He has some big games coming up on his schedule. But I just don't see it. Like, he'd have to win that Penn State game, or that I think they also play Ohio State for it to really even be a consideration for him to win the Heisman. And I don't see Indiana as true contenders like that. But if they somehow get those games done, make it to a Big Ten championship, sure, Fernando Mendoza could be a part of that conversation. Just he's the Heisman favorite by a large margin at this point. I think the markets are currently at plus 650 for Fernando Mendoza, and then the next closest is Dante Moore at plus 1,000. Who, off of that point, I think that Dante Moore has a way better chance. Oregon was my national champion pick coming into the season, and Dante Moore has like given me a lot of faith in that pick. Getting to sit behind Dylan Gabriel last year, 5-star quarterback, transfer from USC. Like he's been highly touted his whole career, and he had to sit for a little bit now, but he's made the best of his opportunity. And obviously it hasn't been against the greatest competition over the first couple weeks, but he does have a chance to prove it at least this week against Penn State, and then further along in that Big Ten schedule. And I think that's one of the guys that at the quarterback position, you'd kind of like, is definitely a guy that you want to look out for at this point, because there just aren't that many. It feels like all of the quarterbacks that came in with a lot of buzz, Arch Manning, Garrett Nussmeier, like you mentioned, have just have fallen off a little bit. And then Jaden Maiava, also out of USC, is playing really well. So I think they're one of the most explosive offenses in the country. So I think that's another name you can throw out there as one of those guys that could definitely be sitting in New York by the end of the season.
I think out of all of the names that I'm seeing at the very top of the FanDuel odds, I like Dante Moore the best. I just would love to see it against Penn State for his case specifically. This is definitely a year where if there was a running back like Ashton Genty or a wide receiver corner like Travis Hunter, I would be willing to sit here and tell you that for the first time in 45 plus years or whatever, that this is going to be the year that a quarterback doesn't get an invite to be a finalist. They would invite 3, and they would maybe pair him with a Jeremiah Smith or something like that, if that was the case, right? If those two guys were in the running this year, but that's obviously not the case. And you had so many of the preseason guys drop off, so it leaves room, it leaves some openness in the race, and I think it's fun. I enjoy keeping track of the Heisman when it's not so obvious, and it's almost like this rather than a 2-man race.
Yeah, I think just the whole general landscape of college football is becoming more fun as a whole. Being able to watch a team like your favorite team, and even though they have a loss or two, be able to consider them serious contenders to at least be in the college football playoff, and the Heisman race being so open. I think that this year of college football has been will be one of the most fun that like I've ever watched, at least personally. Also, I wanted to correct Dante Moore was a UCLA transfer, which how good does that look like in hindsight? So yeah, I said USC, but Dante Moore definitely a UCLA transfer.
Let's preview some of the big games this week in college football for Week 5. Let's start with Oregon-Penn State, probably the biggest game of the week, I would say personally. But who do you have winning this one, and where do you lean actually?
Yeah, so I think that a lean is definitely the way to put this game because both of these teams are two of the best in the country. I think that at any given point, if the resumes were all equal, you could consider these like top 3 to 4 teams in the nation at this point. Dante Moore has looked really good, like we talked about in the last segment. Drew Aller hasn't looked as good, but it's not he hasn't had to. He's played Villanova, FIU, and it just hasn't had to be there for Drew Aller. I think that the defense is really shined for both these sides in both these games. In this game, like the defense for Penn State is one of the best in the country, has a lot of returners, and also has a lot of talent on that side of the ball. But as Oregon is my national champion pick, I think that I have to stick by them through this game. And personally, I won't mind if they win or lose this game. I have just a theory about the Big Ten championship being completely irrelevant, but I won't go too deep into that. Oregon is my lean. I really like Dante Moore. I really like this defense. I really like Dan Lanning. I think that they'll get it done on a wider scale and winning the national championship this year. And I think they can also get it done this weekend.
Yeah, I think I think Oregon is my lean too. I think this is the time where we really figure out if returning all of those starters on a playoff team does actually present wins this season. We talked about this in the offseason, and it seems like it's such an obvious indicator, right? You would think totally if you're returning so many guys from last year's playoff team that you're going to be one of the favorites to win. But I'm just a little bit skeptical and curious of whether or not that actually comes to fruition every single year, especially if you're not a team that won the national championship or anything like that. I'm starting to look at Penn State more so as I don't think that James Franklin needs this win or anything like that. I've heard that. I don't think that that's the case. But last year they beat SMU and Boise State in the playoffs. I have a little bit of a pushback on this team is going to be a bona fide playoff team. They're the second best team, no doubt about it, in the Big Ten. I like what Oregon is looking like. Neither of these teams have been challenged. So, we've said that Dante Moore's played well. Neither of them have been challenged. So we're going to see and learn more on Saturday. But I would say definitely my lean and my gut is telling me, hey, look, this Penn State team is very talented. Drew Aller, maybe, he's got a really low QBR. We talked about that off air. But, he's good. But, am I trusting him over Dante Moore right now? No, and not right now. So I'm going to go with Oregon, and I think that they have enough. I think that they win this game, but I think it's close regardless.
Yeah, I don't have any disagreements there. I think that this game will be. I think that you made will be close regardless. And the point I was just about to say is that I think that you made a good point with James Franklin. I don't think that this is a game that he necessarily needs to win. I think that both these teams will be competitive towards the end, and they both have big games coming up regardless of the outcome of this game. So this isn't a must win for James Franklin. But just in terms of getting that narrative off your back, everybody will be talking it into this game. The pre-game narrative is always, will James Franklin win a big one? And this would just be a good one for the whole team's morale to get James Franklin this win, and then go into upcoming games with just a better mindset, having a top 10 win in Oregon, one of the best teams in the nation.
All right, Alabama, Georgia. Kalen DeBoer really feels like the tide is turning narrative-wise for him. But will they be able to go into Athens and beat Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the narrative's turning a little bit, but is that because we're 4 weeks away since they played at FSU and just got absolutely dismantled, and then we're able to beat up on schools that aren't really competitive in football right now. Wisconsin, the latter end of that, and they've been up and down for years on end, but I don't see it with this Alabama team, and I don't really see it with Kalen DeBoer this year, unfortunately. I think that this Georgia team is a little too talented, and Gunnar Stockton is definitely at least a step above what he was last year, and so I think that this Georgia team just gets it done. Like we talked about this off air, Georgia doesn't lose at home. They have like the longest home winning streak in the country, and that's something to be said. Athens is one of the toughest places to play, and do I trust Ty Simpson to go into Athens off of this team that so freshly remembers Ryan Williams going for like almost 200 yards against them last year and having that crazy spin move that won them that game? I think this game goes differently. I think that Georgia's definitely the play here, and I think that they probably win convincingly.
I think all of these games today that we're talking about are going to be close, but yeah, I'm sticking chalk here, and I'm going to say Georgia. I think that Tennessee win does a lot for them. I think they showed that they have some offensive firepower that is legit, and Alabama too. At the same time, in the same breath that Georgia's won 33 games in a row at home, or I believe 33, and then since 2019, right? Like that is a major streak. In that same breath, Alabama also hasn't been great on the road in Kalen DeBoer's era. They obviously lost that game against Florida State at the beginning of the year. They played really bad last year in Norman late in the season. And I just don't really buy them on the road. And I don't think a couple of that with Georgia's dominance at home. And I also just think Georgia's the better team. And I think that they have the better coach. I don't see it from them, but I do think that they're very talented, and they were able to get some of those confidence boosting games. Like we mentioned against Wisconsin, who's just has a bit of a mess of a program right now, which I think helps them. But and it'll help them keep this game close. But I just don't think that they'll be able to beat Georgia. It is too much for me to say that they will. But I think in classic kind of Alabama fashion, even under Kalen DeBoer, I think they'll keep it closer than a lot of people might think.
Yeah, I did say that they were going to win convincingly towards the end of that. Would it surprise me if Alabama goes out here and is it keeps it within a one-score game and it's a back and forth game? Not at all. But I truly just don't see it with Ty Simpson and Kalen DeBoer this year, and I think that those confidence boosters can go only so far. When the Georgia has confidence boosters of their own, and their confidence boosters aren't UL Monroe and Wisconsin. Their confidence booster is a win in a tough environment at Rocky Top, and one of the best games we've seen all season. So I think that Georgia is able to win this one. Is able to win this one.
LSU-Ole Miss, the 4 versus 13 matchup. If my memory serves me correctly, who do we got in this game?
Yeah, so I have LSU in this one, sticking chalk like we were doing earlier, but I don't I could definitely see this one being like a very close game, and I don't think that that this is a blow up by any means. I think that the fact that they're probably going to have to go to Trinidad Chambliss again at Ole Miss. I don't know. I don't really see the hype as much as some other people do, and I think that LSU defense is really good at football. So we'll see how that ends up turning out. But I'm not really on the Garrett Nussmeier hype train either. I don't really believe in either of these quarterbacks. So do I think that this could be a low scoring, very tight game? I definitely think that that's how this game could go. Even though Lane Kiffin wants the exact opposite with all the shenanigans that are going on over there, he wants us to take the over. I don't really see it happening, especially against LSU defense that is so talented, and I think Ole Miss can hold up their end of the bargain too, especially with Garrett Nussmeier not reeling, but not playing particularly well this season. Definitely, at least for his draft stock, kind of tanking that a little bit.
I think Garrett Nussmeier, honestly, my lean here is that he's going to be better this week than we have seen him in the first handful of weeks. And I like Ole Miss, but I just don't know if they have the same ceiling as LSU because of LSU's defense. One of the better, not surprises this season has been just how dominant that defense has been, being able to force DJ Lagway into 5 turnovers, kind of just stomping on Clemson's offense too for most of that game is really impressive to me, despite how both of those other team seasons have went. And I think it's a good bulletin board material for LSU to be underdogs in this game. And I'm seeing on ESPN Bet, I am seeing Ole Miss favored. Oh, no, never mind. I'm seeing Ole Miss favored -1.5 ESPN Bet.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, then I think that maybe it's not as chalky as I thought it was going to be. I didn't really realize exactly what the line was, but I think that LSU goes out and wins this ball game. So
Yeah.
maybe we're riding with the underdog here.
Yeah, no, I guess we are. It's a little bit surprising. LSU opened as the favorite, so that's why I was kind of tripping up over it too. But yeah, Ole Miss is now the favorite, -1.5, so it's flipped with that. But yeah, I think we both said our case there for LSU. Did you have anything else on it, really quick?
Yeah, I just also last thing on LSU or from the Ole Miss perspective, like they were also in a shootout with Arkansas a couple weeks ago, and I understand that Arkansas has improved from at least last year, but I don't think that is convincing enough. And Tulane is supposed to be one of those teams that could be coming out of the group of five as that 12th team in the playoff, but still, like shootouts with Kentucky and Arkansas in back-to-back weeks also doesn't do enough for me. I really want to see them against good competition. We'll see it this week if they're able to get it done at home versus LSU. Good on them, and I could definitely there's a world where that happens, but LSU is definitely the lean here, at least for me.
Let's go with a sneaky game this weekend. Ohio State, Washington. Washington should be ranked. So you got a lot of whispers coming around, but will they be able to rise to the occasion and beat Ohio State, who's on the road?
Yeah, so the most interesting point I had on this game was the fact that Washington it has been a sneaky little program for years on end now, for dating back to like I remember like when Myles Gaskin was on that team in like 2018, he former Miami Dolphins legend. But even before then, Washington's been a good team in the Pac-12 and now in the Big Ten. And from their Big Ten to Pac-12 to Big Ten transfer, they haven't lost a home game. They have 22 home. Their home winning streak is 22 games now, only second to Georgia. And I think that definitely plays into it. That is an intense home environment. And just in general, year over year, they haven't lost there since 2022. So it's definitely an interesting game. I think that Ohio State still wins it, but this game could be a lot closer than a lot of people think it's going to be. And especially if Ohio State's anything more than, I don't know exactly what the line is right now, but 10 plus point favorites, I think that Washington could just definitely be a lean, at least on the spread.
Yeah. Could this be a game where Julian's saying on the road, Washington's got a great home winning streak as well? Could this be a game where he potentially struggles? Is that what we see? Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, are they not going to be enough to bail him out? I think that's Washington's angle here. And you're right. They've had a very solid program for a lot of years. Chris Peterson was there when you were thinking about that 2018 era. He obviously isn't the coach now. They had a bit of a hiccup, but it seems like they're really kind of coming back into the fold. This team should be ranked, so that's why it looks a little bit deceiving as well. I don't think that I buy into Washington being able to shut down the Ohio State offense in a sense. So that's why I still would take the Buckeyes here. But I can get the spread here in a second, but I definitely think that this is a game where it's Washington. Washington keeps it within a touchdown here, final score.
Yeah, and this Washington offense has been dynamic this year. They played in the Apple Cup just last week, and it's one of those like matchups where I feel like it has to be towards the end of the season because we had some great Apple Cup games where like it was snowing and it was just a lot of fun between Washington State and Washington. That game is a rivalry game, though. Those teams don't like each other, and Washington just absolutely blew the brakes off Washington State. The final score is 59-24. Washington State was never really close, and they just Washington blew it open in the fourth quarter, scoring 28 points unanswered. So yeah, this Washington team should be ranked and is one of those teams that like is on the fringe of being ranked and is probably not like looked at as highly because they don't have a number next to their name, but is a good team and could finish like definitely in the top 25. So this game could definitely be closer than expected. I'd still lean Ohio State. Ohio State's defense has too many good players on it, and then their offense is just like has possibly one of the best players we've ever seen in college football. So I don't think you can go away from them even with Washington's long home winning streak. But I think this game would be closer than a lot of people expect.
Maybe if we saw Washington against a better opponent so far this year, I think I'd be willing to say so, but I just don't know what their ceiling is. And it's going to be too much for me to say that their potential ceiling could be beating Ohio State. I think that that's too far. Ohio State favored by 9.5 points. I do think Washington could keep it under that. So for what it's worth, I think they at least cover. Let's move into USC, Illinois. Illinois just had maybe one of the worst showings that they have had as a decent squad in the history of their program. Legitimately, 63-10 drubbing against Indiana, and and USC is coming off of a decent or good win against Michigan State. So kind of the tale of two programs. They intersect as a top 25 matchup here in the Big Ten. Who do we got?
Give me Luke Altmaier to bounce back and win this game against USC. I think that there are a lot of people on this USC train, one of the best offenses in the country, and I don't know. I just have a feeling that that Illinois is going to bounce back this week, and they're gonna take it to USC. Maybe not take it to USC, but I think that at least take Illinois on the spread. There's a reason why even after such a bad loss last week, only 7.5-point dogs. And this is with that spread getting a little bit crazier because of the fact that everybody's on USC's hype train right now. I think that they'll keep it closer than a lot of people expected, especially after that Indiana loss. Like everybody's ripping on Illinois right now. Give Luke Altmaier, give me him hot take to win this USC game.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go the other way. And I appreciate you for making the end of this video very interesting, at least. This opened at 1.5 for USC, and it's now at 6.5. So I will say that type of movement is pretty crazy just to see. But I would say USC probably covers that as well. From what I saw against Illinois, from what I saw from Illinois against Indiana, I just don't trust them to play with the quote-unquote big dogs of this conference anymore. I understand they were on the road, and Indiana was just smelled blood. They felt like they had to make a statement, and I do like Luke Altmaier. But with all of that being said, USC is balanced. They run the ball extremely well, and the pass game is there. Lincoln Riley feels like he's finally building a little bit of momentum with this USC team, and I think it's just the wrong time for Illinois to have a game after losing by 53 points. I think they would love to have had a tune-up game here, and I think this is the wrong team to do it against. USC, I also think, wants to make a statement and dunk on Illinois. I think that's going to happen again here. I don't think it's going to be 63-10 by any means, but I'm thinking 35-17 type of game. I think this USC offense can score a little bit on Illinois. I don't really see Illinois winning this game.
They come back to their home fans, and what do they want more than anything after losing by 53 points? They want to win. God damn it. Give me Illinois to beat the fight. Give me the Illinois to beat the fight ons, bro. Like they're taking this one. I feel good about it. Plus 195, smack the money line, do what you have to do.
Oh my gosh.
Illinois comes all the way back from a disappointment last week. And this is their tune-up game, bro. This is their get right game.
All right. Any other predictions that you want to make before we get out of here? Anything to watch for the weekend?
No, that was my big one.
That was your big one?
That was my big
one. Well, you know what? I will say I respect it. Virginia and Florida State play tonight. Closer than the experts think. I'm a little bit worried Florida State's not going to be able to deliver the Miami-Florida State top 10.
If Florida State loses this game, it would just be bad for football. Like they have confirmed God in game day, and it would suck for Florida State to drop to like 14, 15 in the rankings by losing to Virginia. I understand this is a Virginia team that comes into this game undefeated and has been good throughout the course of their first couple games. But I mean, dude, they just for college football being good, for that rivalry being good, the Miami versus FSU bring back kind of like the glory days of what it once was. Like the Miami has a really good defense this year and a solid offense, and FSU has an offense that looks really potent and a defense that is pretty good as well. I think that the FSU really needs to come out and make a statement versus Virginia, and they did against Alabama. They just need to have another game like that. I think Tommy touchdowns, Thomas Cassiano. Why am I calling him that? I'm a Miami fan. He's looked good enough through his first couple games where he should be able to light up this defense, and if the defense can hold up, then I don't see why this would be a close game. I understand that Virginia's good, but the 6.5 point spread surprised me a little bit. I thought that they were going to come into this game a little bit heavier than that.
Yeah, Virginia's a decent ACC team, but Florida State at night on the road, it would be a little bit different if this was late October or November. Maybe it would be a little bit colder or something like that, and I could see a trap game. But I already actually think that this does present a little bit as a trap game. I just think it'll be close. I'm not going to pick Virginia here, but I could see this being like Florida State wins on a game-winning field goal or something. Like I legitimately think it could be that close.
I would be upset about that. Like I want to see Florida State come out and do what they should be doing in Virginia.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching to the end of the video. This has been the Big Little Podcast. I'm your host, Previty. That's Andrew Greig, and we'll see you guys next time.